Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Wealth Conversation podcast with me, Tsitsi Mutiti. I guide high-achieving women on their journey to build lasting wealth so they can prepare for an abundant future in every area of their life. I hope that today's episode will help you to transform your relationship with money so you can make the choices that will enable you to create the opportunities and lasting wealth that you desire. Let's get straight into this week's episode. Hey there, it's good to have you back with us. So I know you've been listening to this podcast every single week and that you've been taking in the wealth of knowledge from all the guests that have been on the podcast so far. But a lot of you have told me that you haven't taken any action, mainly because you're not sure where to start. And I get it, because I've been there before. The good news is that I can definitely help you get clear on the 3 steps that you can take straight away to create the solid foundation that you desire. So head to the show notes and click the link to book a Power Hour session with me. There's definitely never been a better time to become the designer of your financial future. In this episode, I'll be discussing some of the financial basics that anyone going through a divorce should be aware of, so they can unscramble their finances and begin to design their next chapter. My guest is Tamsin Caine. She is a chartered financial planner and resolution accredited divorce financial planner. She founded Smart Divorce in 2018 to help couples and individuals to work out how to separate their finances so they can divorce without the need for court. Welcome, Tamsin, to the Wealth Conversation podcast.
Hi, Tsitsi. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad that you are here with us today. Please, could you start off by introducing yourself?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Tamsin Caine. I am a chartered and certified financial planner, and I'm also a resolution accredited divorce specialist. So the majority of the time I spend working with couples and individuals who are going through separation, divorce, or dissolution of a civil partnership, and I help them to fathom out their finances and work out what might be a fair settlement and help them both move on to a great and fabulous future.
Wow, that sounds absolutely amazing, but also sounds like quite an interesting space to be in. What made you decide to focus on clients who are going through a divorce?
As is, I think, quite often the case, I got divorced myself, and so I don't know how your relationship is with, and I reckon we've talked about this numerous times before, but in relationships, like there's normally one person who does certain things around the relationship and the other person who does other tasks around the relationship. So, for example, my ex-husband was brilliant at gardening, mowing the lawn, making sure everything was tidy, getting rid of the moss, all that. And when we split up, I was like, oh, well, that's a horrible job, and got a gardener. So money is very similar. There's usually one person in a relationship that looks after the money. And the other person is often quite bamboozled by the whole subject of money. And as I say, I was the money person in our relationship. So I was really lucky when we split up that I did understand the finances, but my ex-husband didn't so much. And he would tell you himself, he didn't know who our mortgage was with. Yeah, of course he signed the paperwork and we discussed it and so on, but he didn't really need to understand it because he knew that I was looking after it, and he didn't really want to. It wasn't his thing. Even now he still phones me and says, oh, I need to ask you some questions about my pension. It's like, yeah, no problem. So I kind of figured that if I wasn't in my shoes, if I was in his shoes, I'd be really finding it incredibly difficult and incredibly fearful to step forward and start trying to make some financial decisions. And it struck me that the work that we did with our clients on a day-to-day basis would work incredibly well for people going through divorce and separation. And so I decided that I was going to find out more about how I could go about working with divorcing people. I had a couple of clients who were in that position, and about 6 months after that, we set up Smart Divorce. So, which is on the 1st of February, will be 3 years old. Oh no, 4 years old.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
4 years old.
4 years old.
Yeah, so very nearly, very
Yeah.
nearly.
Yeah, that's amazing, Tamsin. Yeah, I can't even begin to think what I would do if I had to kind of take the bins out every Friday. That's not my job. Well, if I
And
had to do that on top of all the other stuff that I do in the house and for the relationship. So I can see and I get it how people can just become so overwhelmed with those sort of things that just happen automatically, not because you don't want to do it. In order for the relationship and the household to function, you have to split those tasks.
of course you do. It's a team at the end of the day, just the
Mm,
same as when we're in a work environment. We have our work team will have specific jobs, and we will all play to our strengths. I'm pretty dreadful at admin. I mean, I do it and it's absolutely essential. But last week, my lovely administrator was unwell, so she wasn't in. And I was just like, oh, and she came back in today. I was like, thank you.
I know that feeling.
It's like, can't do another week of that.
Exactly. Of answering queries.
But that's it. But marriage is the same, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a team and you play to the strengths in that relationship. So there's no judgment about having set up a relationship like that. It's absolutely perfectly normal and happens in pretty nearly every marriage that I come across. But it does mean there's this extra layer of fear for the person who wasn't looking after the money in the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so true. So your business is almost 4 years old. And one of the things that you've recently done is co-author a book titled Your Divorce Handbook. It's what you do next that counts. I love that title.
Oh, thank you. That was
and-
not me. I
oh,
will have to
really?
say, I need to credit the title was Marcia, who's one of our fabulous writers. She's a mediator, and she came up with the title. And as soon as she said it, I was like, that is the one. That is
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And it actually made me think of a handful of clients who've approached me in terms of coaching, who were like at the beginning of the divorce process. And, the focus is so much on the breakup and all the emotional trauma and the upheaval. But, by saying it's what you do next that counts, it kind of gives you that sense of, there is light at the end of this tunnel. At least that's how I interpreted it. And you do have a life after the divorce.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what? In most cases, a really good life and an improved life, because you're in a position when you go through divorce where you can design what happens to you next. And okay, there might be financial restraints and there might be time constraints because of children, etc. But essentially, you can make all the decisions for yourself. So, you can decide whether to have leftovers for tea. You can decide where you want to go on holiday. You can decide what you're going to do with your weekends. And you're not deferring to somebody else or compromising for somebody else's wants and needs. So it is a massive opportunity. I kind of liken it to the chrysalis and the butterfly. And what we see during divorce itself is that chrysalis period where you're kind of starting to fathom things out inside the safety of the chrysalis. And when you go finalize the divorce and maybe a couple of years on, we see our clients grow these beautiful wings and start really flying with their life. And some of the things that some of my clients are now achieving post, so in some cases only a few months post divorce, but certainly in others where it's been a couple of years, you can see like physical change in them, the light in their eyes, the smiles on their faces. And yeah, it is a beautiful thing to watch.
That's absolutely amazing. Now let's get back to the book. So
sorry.
No, it's fine. I actually love that because we were talking about the book, and what you were talking about is that whole part about what happens next, which is for most people more positive than not. Yeah. And the book has several chapters in it. What areas does the book focus on, and who would you say should be reading this book?
Okay, so it's written by 6 of us, and we've each written 2 chapters. Although I cheated a bit because I wrote the introduction as well, so I got some extra words. The 6 of us are all divorce professionals. So the book begins with the starting point that I think you should begin with, which is the emotional side of things. You said that you found in your financial coaching that people approach you in that situation and they're all full of emotions and so on, and you're so absolutely right. And so my advice whenever I meet somebody who's right at the beginning of their journey is you need somebody who can give you that emotional support at the beginning. You need to see a therapist or a counselor or a divorce coach, but somebody who can give you that emotional support, because the danger if you don't is you're going to lean on your lawyer or your financial planner for emotional support. And whilst I'll do my absolute best, I am not qualified as a counsellor or a therapist, and you're better off and having somebody in your team who is. So that's where we start. So we start with Susan, who's a counsellor and hypnotherapist, and she is amazing. And I can tell you that from personal experience because I have worked with her. So we start with Susan, and we move on to mediation and Marcia, and she talks about mediation and how mediation works, what it is, all the options that you have available in mediation. What all of us feel is that where it's at all possible, we would love to keep our couples out of court, because court is mega expensive, firstly, and is also, unless it's really essential, it can cause real barriers between a couple. If you've got children in particular and you're going to have to see these people afterwards, or this person afterwards, what you don't want is co-parenting relationships that's based on a battle that you've had in court. So if you can sort things outside of court, and all 6 of us believe in this very, very strongly, then we ideally suggest that you do. So yeah, Marcia covers mediation, which is one of the non-court routes. And then we go on to talk a little bit about how the legal process works. And then there's a chapter on finances, which I wrote. So all about how to gather your financial information together, what you might be looking at, so the different financial products that are involved, looking at a budget and how to put the budget together, because you need that, something called a Form E, which is the disclosure document that most lawyers use. There's chapters on mortgages and buying a house, and it might be about buying the house that, the marital family home, or it might be about buying somewhere new. And then we move through, we do touch on court and how the court process works, just for those people who it's completely unavoidable that they have to go to court because basically their partner's not playing ball. And then also we cover what happens financially, what you do afterwards, how to design your new life financially. And then we end on kind of getting out there again. So making new friends, going dating. Oh. and really creating that new life for yourself.
I love that. It sounds like there's a lot of thought has definitely been put into this, but then it's amazing that it's 6 professionals who focus on divorce coming together and putting together this comprehensive book. I mean, I've read your 2 chapters only because I got the book fairly recently, and my husband was totally shocked. He was like, "Who's sending my wife a book on divorce?"
Oops, am I off the Christmas card list?
Yeah. No, I explained why I had it, but actually, whilst I was reading it, especially the sections about money, it was kind of like a reminder for me as well to be like, make sure you've got these things in order, because I don't think it's necessarily all about divorce in terms of making sure your finances in order, but there's certain things that do come up in different scenarios where you need to have at least some knowledge of what you've got. So I think it's a good reminder, even for people who are in very good, solid relationships, to just make sure they've got things in order and and they are aware. I think that's the one thing I got from what you were talking about in your chapters, Tamsin, that, at least even if you're not handling the money, at least be aware where things are, which banks you're using as a household, etc.
This is becoming a bit of a thing for me because, yes, I work with people who are going through divorce and separation. But if you're in a good, solid relationship, you ought to be having conversations about money fairly regularly. I know we've talked about this many, many times before, Tsitsi, but this is so important because it's the secrecy around money that can create massive problems. I was talking the other day, and I can't even remember who I was talking to, but I was talking to someone the other day about this, and we were saying, it's all well and good having your own money and your own bank accounts, and I totally agree with that, but not secret. And both of you should have your own bank accounts, but not secret. And both of you should understand what you have and where it is. And none of this, oh, this old thing, like, I only bought this yesterday. It's like, no, you didn't. Or, it's like, what? Be honest. Like, both people should have their own money. Both people should have their own fun money that they can go and spend without judgment on what the heck they like. And I really believe that that's a basis for a good marriage. And if you can have those sensible conversations, then it will go far, I personally think. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a reminder as to having those conversations within a good solid marriage, as well as if you're going through divorce. Obviously, you have to have complete awareness of what you've got and where it is in your name, I should add. You don't have to worry about things you don't know about, because that information is exchanged. So if the other person's looked after all the money and knows where most of the stuff is and you haven't got a clue, don't worry about it, because it will all come out in the disclosure.
Yeah. So let's talk about the first chapter that comes up that you've written, which is about how to unscramble my finances. That's the title of the chapter. What are the main points in that chapter, and why was it important for you to write this chapter?
So the main points are about having this understanding about your finances and about completing this terrifying for me, which people get their knickers in a twist about. And because it looks scary, it's really big form. I think it's 30 pages long. So you're going to download it when your solicitor gives it to you, and you're going to be like, oh, what? Like, that's huge.
That is huge. I mean,
It's huge.
My brain gets scrambled with 3 pages of a form. So 30.
I know.
Wow.
Imagine. So you're already in like a state of emotional upheaval.
Yeah.
And then your lawyer goes, here's a form, it's 30 pages long. And you're like, thanks very much. Where do I start with that? And it's about money, which you're kind of already a bit scared of, because lots of people in this country are a bit scared of money, because we don't talk about it, because it's one of those, it's the last taboo, isn't it? Like, we can happily have a chat about sex, but we're not going to talk about money, because that's out of bounds. So I think that's the thing. I think you get this big form, you don't know what to do with it, you don't know how to fill it in, and hopefully my chapter takes you through filling in your form E, or finding the information and understanding what things are. So pensions are like minefield to, well, most people, let's be honest. Unless you work in financial services, you're probably like, oh, I've got this pension, I don't know what it is, I don't know what it does, I don't know what it's going to do for me, I don't know where it's invested. And all of a sudden somebody's asking you questions about it that you've got to fill in on this form, which is a court form, which you sign to say you've told the truth. And if you haven't got the foggiest what you're talking about, then that can be tricky. So yeah, hopefully how to unscramble your finances takes you through getting all the information together and being in a position where you can complete your form E.
Yeah, when I read that chapter, I saw that Form E and I thought I was going to go on the internet and look for it. And I was like, nah.
I'll send you a copy. You'll love it.
No. If I ever get to the stage where I'm going through a divorce, I'll deal with it then.
Oh, do you know, it's so hard. And the other thing about the Form E is you have to have evidence. So if you kind of pretend you're a policeman, like gathering evidence. So if you write something down on that form, you need to then evidence it. So if you're going to tell me you've got £5.50 in your bank account, I want a bank statement that shows me that you've got £5.50 in it. So like behind the 30 pages of actual form, you've probably got like 100 pages of evidence that back up whatever it is you've said in the form. So yeah, it's a big job. It is a big job, and lots of people find it very overwhelming. So
yeah,
yeah,
I was actually
spent a lot of
about
time
to say
helping
that.
people through that.
Yeah, it sounds overwhelming, but I guess it also depends on which side of the divorce equation you're on. Or if you're on one side, you really want to know what is there, especially if you don't know about the money or if there's been secrecy, etc.
Yeah.
It's really important that you kind of get an understanding of what you could be entitled to and where all of that is sitting. So in that respect, yes. But yeah, it sounds long.
Yeah, it is long. It is
Yeah.
long. I think that whole entitled to piece is interesting as well, because in this country, a lot of people ask me what they're entitled to. And it's really not an exact science. Even if you go through court all the way to a final hearing, which is like the big end point where a judge will go, you can have that and you can have that. Even at that point, one judge will award those proportions and another judge will award something else, because it's not an exact science. And I think because lots of people say, well, what am I entitled to? It's like, well, it's not like that. It kind of doesn't work like that. And because nobody will actually tell you what you can have until the final hearing, it's sort of a negotiation up until that point. So it's about working out how both of you can split the money up and move forward from a position where you feel happy is the wrong word, but that you have both had to compromise, but that you can move forward.
Yeah.
So you might not be happy with the result, but at least you're in a position where you can move forward.
Yeah, move forward and start the new life.
Yeah.
Yeah, which takes me to your next chapter, which is chapter 11, which is titled Designing Your Next Chapter. And it's all about money. Could you tell us a bit about that chapter?
Yeah. So one of the favorite bits of my job for me is about helping people to work out what they want to do. So money is all well and good, but it's a tool, isn't it? It's a tool that enables us to do the things that we want to do with our lives. And it's kind of similar to time, isn't it? You've got time and you've got money, and these are the tools that help us to do the things that we want to do. And I think for me, it's that point at which we're starting to help people to set their minds free. So what ideas have you got? What's your real priority? What kind of, if the money was absolutely no object, what would you do? And I think starting to think about these things is really useful and really important. And then we can start to put numbers against that. So for example, one of my clients who has had a successful divorce, she's been divorced about, I think I've been working with her for about 4 years now. Although it might be 5, because I think I lost a year when the pandemic, but it's something around that. And she wants to, so her kids are older teenagers, and she really desperately wants them to have some time together, having done some exciting adventures together before they leave home. So she wants to buy a camper van. So she's telling me all this story. So I'd really like to have a camper van. I really want to go traveling. I'd love to go there. I'd love to go there. I'd love to go there. And she's like, she can see it all in her mind. So it's like, okay, right, let's have a think about what this is going to cost. So it's about putting your life together, looking at what you've got in your world now, and seeing how what money you've got can help you to achieve the things that you want to do, and the life that you want to live with your future. And if it doesn't, okay, what things can we change? What levers can we pull to make a difference? So can you set up a side hustle? It seems everybody's setting up a side hustle, doesn't it? Can we set up a side hustle? Can you ask for a promotion? Can you potentially look for a different job? Could you get some training and do something slightly different? What levers can we pull to make it possible for you to live this life that you really want to live? So, and for me, watching my clients do this is the life I wanted to live, and I'm doing it. Yeah, that for me is the highlight.
I love that. I love that. One of my strap lines is become the designer of your financial future. So, when I was going through that chapter, I was like, yes, 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 yes. Just talking about this, there's so much you can actually do to make whatever you desire come true in terms of creating the money, which is the tool that will help you have those experiences or buy those things that you want to. We have so much power in us to do that. And so when I saw the title of the chapter and reading that, I was like, yeah, exactly. I completely agree.
Do you know what? We are all in charge of our own destinies. And the thing is, I think most of us don't think supersized, do we? We don't like what I would do if money was no object. It's actually not, it might feel just out of reach from me.
Yeah.
But actually it's not out here. It's not like I'd need to win the Euro lottery in order to achieve it. It's just a little bit out of reach, and those things, you can get to those things that are just out of reach because there are ways of earning a bit more, or watching the spending on like, do I always have a Costa? Like, well, if I didn't and I put that money to something else, that could be the difference between me being able to do the things I want and not being able to do the things that I want. So I think our friend Catherine Morgan says give every pound a purpose, and it took me ages to fathom out what on earth she was gibbering on about. But when I got it, I was like, oh yeah, because actually it is about going, well, if I spend it on that might stop me doing that.
Yeah, it's 100% true. And when I'm coaching my clients, one of the steps is to focus on their values, understand what their values are, and make sure that whatever they're doing with their money is in alignment with their values. Because I think that's where we get things wrong. We just kind of spend the money without really thinking about it. And I think once you start identifying what your values are, and then thinking, how is this money helping me fulfill those values that are important to me? Then suddenly you find that however little you feel you've got, actually you're more fulfilled than previously because you're more intentional, like with your money.
Absolutely. So I'm interested. I know this is your podcast and you're hosting, but I'm going to ask you a question. So how do you go about? Because if you asked me what my values were, I'd be a bit like, I have no idea.
Yeah, it's so true. But I think the first question is, what does money mean to you, and what do you believe money should give you? And then it comes out from there. Also, one way that I've been able to work out is just to look at someone's bank statement and see where they spend most of their money, because most of the time we are doing it unintentionally. For me, a long time ago, I used to buy loads and loads of books. The problem was I wasn't reading them. So I had to unpick why this book buying thing was so important to me, and why when someone said, oh, this is a really good book, you should buy it. And it was certain types of books. Like, I don't read fiction, right? I read self-help books. And when I dug deep and started asking myself those questions about why is it so important for me to buy these type of books, it was really about education. Because growing up, my parents were all about education, and and they kept saying education is the key to whatever you want. And I realized that I had taken that on board, and I really believed in it. And so that's where my money was going. But I didn't realize that until I started kind of questioning how my money was being spent. Another example I can give on how one of my values is I love being around people and just spending time with people. So I would find that my money would be spent like going out for a meal. I wouldn't even question it. Going out to a nightclub, I'd question. Like I'd be like, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. But if I go out for a meal, I'm happy to spend a lot of money because I'm around people and we're just, it's that social well-being. I'm feeling connected. People energize me. So yeah, in short, that's how
I love that.
I've been
That's so
able to.
interesting.
Yeah.
That's so cool that you've kind of got to the bottom of what your money goes on and why you do it. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
I reckon it takes a bit of time to get there.
It does. It does. And I think for some people, it takes a bit of time just to accept certain things, that those things are important, because sometimes we don't even realize it, that I actually value this. And our values are so deep seated that we actually just do it automatically. So, but when you sit down with a coach or maybe even a planner, because even with when you're doing the financial planning work for yourself, it's like when I say for yourself, I'm talking about the clients. The questions that you're asked actually tease out some of those things. The example you gave of your client who was talking about creating memories with her children, that's a value for her.
Absolutely.
And she may not articulate it as this is what I value, but she said it. That's the
Yeah,
thing that comes out when she thinks about the best thing she can do with her money.
absolutely. Do you know, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because I think sometimes the words that we use to describe something can be set different thoughts off in our minds. Like to me,
Absolutely.
values are kind of like have a connection with morality. So
Mm,
like what my morals are and how I live my life on a moral perspective, not on a these are things that I value as opposed to these are my values. It's kind of those like sit in different boxes for me, which is really strange. It's like we had a conversation last year about goals, and I really struggle with goals. Like goals mash my head. I don't like them. I associate them with, I used to many years ago working in estate agents, and we had targets, and we used to get a metaphorical thrashing every Wednesday.
oh, wow.
If you hadn't hit every target, and it wasn't like you could have like smashed 90% of them, but if you missed one, you'd really get some hassle, and in front of a big room full of people. And that kind of, for me, goals is always associated with that. And somebody that I know who's she's a fabulous a copywriter actually, and she said, when I think of goals, I always think of a football net. And I'm like, yeah, that was never. But now if I think of goals, I think of Becky and I think of football nets. So I'm like, oh well, that's kind of softened it for me.
Yeah. Well,
Oh
that's
yeah.
good that that's changed. But yeah, no, you're so right. Words and experiences all impact us in different ways. And I think there is no right answer on, like, for example, how do you work out someone's values? It's about a combination of things, because for some people, when you do say values, they're thinking about something completely different. So it's then if this way isn't working, then let's try something else. And one of the ways that I found that tells you everything is looking at the bank statement, to be honest.
That's fascinating.
Uh,
Now I'm like tempted to send you my bank
just
statement
see,
to
yeah,
see
exactly. Send it to me.
see what you figure out from there.
Yeah, then we'll have a
You'll be
conversation
like,
about it.
I
Why are you
think I better
spending so
not
much
send you
money?
my Christmas one because
Okay,
Christmas one's a bit
no.
it kind of skews everything Christmas, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think from February to March, we're more in line with what our
With
value is.
normality.
Yeah, normality,
Yeah.
exactly. We're talking about helping people figure out their values, but you also talked about how you help, when you shared the story about your client who wants to buy the camper van. You've shared how you support your clients. What is the role of a financial planner in the divorce process?
Okay, so different financial planners will view this very, very differently. So I can only tell you what I do, what I feel my role is. So for me, I support my clients from as early on as is humanly possible, really. So it's quite often from very, very early in the separation and very occasionally before they separate. But I can't really help until they're separated. So let's say very early on in the separation. And I will help them to start to gather their financial information together, start to have a look and understand what their financial information looks like and what products they've got and what they mean and what they do. And then we can work as part of a team with a mediator or a lawyer, depending on what route the client wants to go down. And it might be that they don't want to use that either of those and they just want to do everything directly with their spouse or partner. And then we help them to figure out what a fair settlement might look like. So we work out what there is in the pot. So the marital pot is everything you have between you in your world. And we work out what you need of that settlement to continue to live the life that you have been living, albeit there might be a little bit of belt tightening because you are going from one house to two houses, so might be a bit of a squeeze to begin with. But we work out what bit you need, and then we look at it in the overall picture and we think, well, does that sound fair and reasonable? Do we think the other person will be okay with that kind of amount? And then that offer might get put to the other side through a solicitor, it might get discussed in mediation, or it might just get discussed directly. Sometimes the other person will come back with a counter offer, or the other person might start making an offer, and we can pull all that information together and we put it into a very clever system that we have, which shows you so I'm going to call it a cash flow model, so which lots of listeners won't have heard of before, but basically it can show you a picture. So it's a graphical form with colors on it. One color means one thing, the other color means another. And so you can see what life will look like if you accept that offer, or if your ex accepts the offer that you're making to them. And hopefully by doing this toing and froing, we can come to an agreement between, or you and your ex can come to an agreement about how to split the finances off. And then after the financial settlement is done, we can help to implement things like pension sharing orders. If there's a lump sum settlement and you need some income from it, we can help with that. If you need to invest that lump sum because it's a future need, but not something that you need right now, we can help with that. And basically we can continue, and it's not always that everybody needs us afterwards, but quite often clients do. We can help you with that whole process of designing the new life and living that new life, and we can continue to be there to support you as long as you need us to.
Yeah, as you were talking, it just sounded to me that everyone going through a divorce needs to at least have seen a financial planner at some point in the process.
Yeah, I think so. I think there are the odd exceptions where that's not the case, and the odd exceptions would be where there really isn't any money to be splitting up. So, for example, if you live in rental accommodation and there are no pensions to speak of, then you probably don't need us. We're probably not the right people. Or if there's a large amount of debt, again, that's quite difficult for us to assist in those situations. But for the majority of people where there's at least a house and a pension each, then yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Tamsin. And thank you for writing the book. I think for me, it just made me think, if anyone who's going through a divorce has this book, if they were feeling nervous or uncertain, at least they've got an initial form of guidance, and then they can take the next steps. That's the feeling
Yeah,
I
I hope
got.
so. And that's what it's there for. It's not the ultimate guide. It's not completely comprehensive. It's not going to answer every question that you've ever had. And it's general. So it's not specific to individual circumstances. But what we hope it will do will give people enough information to tell them what their options are, to guide them to where they want to go and how they want to go through their divorce, because it is a really personal thing and it is really individual, and you are best off being in control of it. And the way to be in control of it is to know what your options are.
Yeah. And it also gives you an idea of who you should have in your team or where you can seek help for certain areas, which I think is one thing that most people don't have information on, because for some people, for one party, it will come as a surprise, right? They're not ready. They don't know that this thing is coming. And whilst the other person who's ready to get divorced kind of announces that, I'm ready to end this, and they've probably already started, or at least started speaking to people to help them with the process.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, actually, because quite often mediators talk about the emotional imbalance. So the one person being emotionally quite a way ahead, and they need to be aware and give time to the other person to allow them to catch up, to be in the space where they're able to start making decisions. So yeah, I think, and time's another interesting one, because I think really you shouldn't be pushed too hard into making decisions too quickly. Unless you're in court, there shouldn't be a time limit on these things. You should be able to take your time, take some breath, give yourself space before you start making these life-changing decisions. You get one chance to get this right.
Yeah.
And it's so important that you do the right thing for you.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Now, Tamsin, I'm going to ask you the question I ask all my guests. Because I want us to end. Otherwise, we could go on for hours on this topic.
Really
Definitely, I've got so many other questions. So yes, I'll be asking you to come back.
Excellent.
Yeah. Now, as you know, I believe that to create true wealth, we must all be clear on what wealth means to us in each area of our life, and I call these the Wealth Cornerstones. So, in a few words, please could you share what wealth means to you in terms of your physical, your mental, spiritual, social, and financial well-being?
For me, physical well-being is feeling strong, is being happy to look in the mirror and just feeling comfortable in my own skin. And I'm on a mission with that one, because I have gone back to CrossFit. So check me out in 6 months, because I'm hoping I will be super physically wealthy by that point.
Oh, I love that.
Mentally, this is a tricky one, but I think it's about starting to know and understand and love yourself, and know that it's okay to say no sometimes. And I'm still working on that. I'm a people pleaser, and my people pleasing days are hopefully numbered. But I've been working on it for a year, and it's absolutely not a finished product yet. So we're still going on that. And I think for me, mental, physical, and spiritual are all very much linked. And I think if you're in a good place physically and mentally, then you will be in a good place spiritually. But I think it's also really important that we take time to do things that are outside our comfort zone and to try new things. So I did a vision board workshop about 6 months ago, never done one in my life before. And I was like, oh, this is all a bit woo and not really my thing. And it was the best experience I've ever had. So like cutting things out of magazines took me back to my childhood, sticking things. But then the lady I do it with is a lady called Tommy Ludgate, and she's so amazing, and she sets this perfect scene. Anyway, we're cutting all this stuff out of magazines, and then at the end she's like, right, well, like move the pictures and the words around and have a look if you've got any themes. Well, it's like magic. And there were themes there in mine, and I was just, mind was blown. So for me, I think vision board is a big part of that spiritual section that you were talking about. Social for me, I always thought as an extrovert. I don't think I am. I think I'm an introvert randomly, even though I realise I've just talked for England for the last 45 minutes. but what I find is if I've been in social situations, I need to have some time where I'm alone to kind of reboot and kind of breathe and give myself kind of that space back again. So I am a really social person. I really buzz off being with other people. I love it. I love chatting to people, but also learning that I need that space for me where I'm just calm and quiet and perhaps reading a book or listening to some music just to go. So that is wealth for me, knowing when to be with people and when to go, right, time now. So my financial well-being, I've always said I wasn't motivated by money, and I don't think I'm not motivated by stockpiling money. Like, I don't have targets to have money in my bank account just doing nothing with no purpose. So for me, it's about what money can do for me. So I feel at my wealthiest when I know that my plan is on target. So when I know that everything's going according to what my plan would like for the future. So yeah, we're feeling pretty wealthy at the minute.
Absolutely love that. Tamsin, how can anyone listening to this podcast get in touch with you if they feel they would like to work with you, or if they want to purchase the book?
No worries. So you can get the book on Amazon.
Oh, yay.
Or you can get it from yourdivorcehandbook.co.uk. It has its own website, and there's also some additional links and downloads on there as well. So so that's for the book. Me, I think I'm everywhere. So if you're going through separation or divorce, you can find our website is smartdivorce.co.uk. Smart Divorce is also on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn. Or you can find me, I'm Tamsin Caine, and I am also on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn.
Okay. I'll put some of those links in the show notes.
Told you I'm everywhere.
I'll choose a couple.
Choose a select couple.
Yeah. Oh, Tamsin, this has been a really great discussion. When I thought I want Tamsin on, she deals with divorce, what are we going to talk about? I didn't, and then the book came out and I was like, right, that's what we're going to talk about. But there is so much gold in this book, when it comes to money and finances, which is the area that I focus on, but also everything else. And, I'd encourage anyone who is probably in the midst of the divorce just to get a copy of this and just use it as a reminder of some of the things you need to do. And I think what you mentioned at the beginning about the whole self-care, look after yourself first, is really important, because that's something people need to do regardless of whether you're going through a divorce or even if you're not in a relationship. Self-care should be at the top of the list, and it's one thing that a lot of us ignore. So I'm really grateful for the time you've given me, and thank you so much for creating this handbook. I believe it's going to help a lot of people.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed talking to you today, Tsitsi.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Connect with me at The Wealth Conversation on Facebook and Instagram so we can continue the discussion. Also, if you enjoy tuning into this podcast, make sure to leave a rating and review everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Until next week, stay focused on becoming the designer of your financial future.